Alright class, in this video we're going to talk about two major points from the third book of Machiavelli's Discourses on Livy. The first is his discussion of drawing a sect or a republic back towards its beginning as a way of helping it to last for a long time, and we'll talk about all of that. And then the second is about killing the sons of Brutus. And as you'll see, these 2 points are closely related. So, remember, for Machiavelli, it is not normal or natural for us to live together and get along. As we've talked about in other videos, human beings are basically bad. We're acquisitive, we're jealous, we are disloyal, and therefore we're only able to live in communities when somebody, such as Romulus, is strong enough to impose the modes and orders upon us that will force us to be good. What Machiavelli takes this to mean, then, when he talks about drawing things back towards their beginning, is essentially drawing things back to that original imposition of modes and orders. When one wishes to, in a Machiavellian sense, reform a community, one does so by renewing the initial imposition of modes and orders, which, as we saw in the case of Romulus killing Remus, is typically, if not universally, done through violence. This is a central theme, this theme of what's called founding violence, which is to say that in Machiavelli's view, all cities, all communities are founded through some kind of violence that then forces us to live with each other. And this is an idea that Machiavelli put at the forefront of his philosophy. It was, one might say, eventually sort of covered over and forgotten. Contemporary philosophers have discussed it at some length, though. You see it discussed a lot in 20th century philosophy, although I think without an acknowledgement of the fact that Machiavelli was there first. So there are people like Walter Benjamin and Jacques Derrida, Martin Heidegger in his Introduction to Metaphysics, and numerous other major texts and thinkers in 20th century philosophy that reflect on this sort of problem of founding violence. The way Derrida puts it is the first imposition of the law is in fact itself illegal, because there's no law that could justify that first imposition of the law. What that means then in Derrida's usage, or Derrida's thinking, is that the first imposition of the law is sort of unjustifiable and is therefore a kind of violence. And so in Derrida's thought, there's always this sort of founding violence. I don't want to go into too many details about it, but I just want you to know that this theme of founding violence, while Machiavelli probably thinks about it more explicitly and at greater length than anybody prior to him, perhaps with the exception of the Greek historian Thucydides and Augustine of Hippo, the theme is one that's taken up again in contemporary philosophy. What does this mean for the reform of things? If communities are founded on the basis of violence, then the reform of a community is itself always going to be violent. And if the founding of the community was done through one person, remember we read that chapter about needing to be alone, right? That's why Romulus needed to kill Remus. Then the reforming of the community is also going to be done through the violence of one person. So Machiavelli has this weird, almost back and forth between, on the one hand, his commitment to republics and his belief that, in general, republics are better than principalities. But he also takes the view that in order to found and reform republics, one needs almost a kind of prince that will come in and sort of inflict that violence. So that violence is in the founding and violence is in the reforming. Violence in Machiavelli's thought, perhaps disturbingly so, almost sort of takes on this medicinal function, where if we don't apply violence to the community every now and again, the community will fall apart. And why is that? The answer goes back to his fundamental view of human nature, is that we're bad. and essentially we have to be scared into being good. Right? So that's the first point. The second point is about killing the sons of Brutus. And to understand that point, I have to give you some background as to what he is alluding to. We already talked about Romulus. Romulus was the first king of Rome. Rome had about 5 or 6 generations of kings after Romulus. The last king of Rome was a man named Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. For reasons that we don't have to get into right now, Tarquin was overthrown. And one of the leaders of the revolution against Tarquin was Brutus. This is not the same Brutus as the one that famously assassinates Julius Caesar. That's hundreds of years later, but they are related. The Brutus that overthrows Tarquin is the distant ancestor of the Brutus that kills Caesar. Brutus overthrows Tarquin, and they set up the Roman Republic, where rather than being ruled by one king, they were going to be ruled by 2 consuls, and the consuls would be elected by various means through the people. As the time goes on, some people in the Roman Republic begin to yearn for the days of the kings, because the idea was, in the days of the king, if you were friends with the king, you could basically do whatever you want, but now in the Republic, everybody is equal under the law. So if we could get the kings back, we could be their friends, and we could have more freedom to do whatever it is we want without consequences. So a scheme was hatched to try to bring Tarquin and his family back into the city and restore the monarchy to Rome. The Romans found out about this, broke up the scheme, and arrested the conspirators. Among the conspirators, among the people trying to bring the kings back into Rome, were Brutus's 2 sons. Brutus, in his role as consul, had to enforce the law, and he had to do so impartially. And so Brutus had to oversee the trial of his sons for essentially treason against the Republic, and he had to sentence them to death as traitors, and then he had to oversee their execution. And so if you want to, you can Google around and you can find many paintings from the Renaissance and afterwards of Brutus and observing the execution of his sons. Why does Machiavelli talk about the correctness of Brutus executing his sons? Right. So Machiavelli discusses this in chapter 3, where he says, "It is necessary to kill the sons of Brutus if one wishes to maintain a newly acquired freedom." What is going on in killing the sons of Brutus? A couple things. First, it is sort of another instance of founding violence. The violence of the revolution was one, but now sort of the violence of the executions of his sons is like a repetition of that founding violence. Right? So we saw the theme of founding violence in Machiavelli. Beyond that, there's the emphasis on the impartial application of the law. Brutus cannot show partiality to his kids. He can't let them off because, hey, they're my kids. The only way freedom is going to be maintained, Machiavelli thinks, is if the law is applied impartially. Why is that? Well, because when you have people who can break the law with no consequences, Machiavelli thinks, again, because everybody's bad, what inevitably will happen is a breakdown in the law, so the law has to be applied impartially. Why is that? When we are founding a city, or even especially founding a free city, like Machiavelli is talking about here, we are trying to institute modes and orders that will create free citizens, and Machiavelli, like many other people, thinks that a free citizen is also having to be a responsible citizen. Well, if the sons of Brutus, for example, were allowed to break the law but not take responsibility for their actions, that undermines the modes and orders we're trying to introduce. That therefore undermines the whole community we're trying to form and makes the previous founding violence that we had subjected ourselves to or undergone a waste of time. It makes it worthless. It undermines everything. So we have to apply the law impartially, to uphold the modes and orders cruelly if necessary, so that those modes and orders can mold our citizens into the kinds of people that can preserve freedom in their city. Any nostalgia for the previous modes and orders, any nostalgia for the old way of doing things, is going to get in the way of the imposition of the new way of doing things. So again, the sons of Brutus, who are nostalgic for the days of Tarquin, have to be executed. Those are the major points I want to make about Book 3. There are other important things that he focuses on here, simulating craziness and so forth. The general theme in the discussion of the chapters I assigned to you is Brutus. And so, beyond what I've said to you, when you read it and reread it, think about the figure of Brutus that Machiavelli is sort of holding up as an example, and contrast that in your head with Socrates. Ask yourself if there are things that Machiavelli's Brutus does that Plato's Socrates would not do. Think about the similarities and differences between Plato's Socrates and Machiavelli's Brutus. And with that point, with that question or that idea, I'll let you go.